Morning all, Souther here. This is going to be part one of my story about NASCAR in Australia, the Australian NASCAR Championship and the Australian Stock Car Championship, which was the same thing, only it wasn't NASCAR anymore after we lost NASCAR sanctioning at the end of the 94 season. So I thought I'd start at the end. I thought I'd start at when it ended, because a lot of people are always asking, why did it end? What happened? Why did it stop? And there's so much misinformation out there too. There's all these experts who have these ridiculous ideas of what happened, and it's just entrenched in them. They heard it somewhere off someone one day, and that made it a fact, and you can't convince them otherwise. And these people had nothing to do with the track. They didn't race there, but they all have an opinion. Well, I was there for I was there for every single race that happened, either as a spectator early on, a crew member, a team owner, or a driver. I was there from day one till the end. And I can tell you what happened. It was nothing to do with Bob Jane not doing the right thing by us. It was nothing to do with housing. It was nothing to do with noise. It was nothing to do with the track. It was nothing to do with any of those things. What it was to do with the show. We'd stopped putting on a quality show. We'd lost by 1999, when we finished on the Thunderdome, we'd lost a lot of our star drivers. Nobody was investing in new cars. We had a bunch of old cars and a bunch of old wannabe drivers. We got into a situation where old cars were cheap, so guys who would never ever have driven in a series like that now all of a sudden could go and buy an old heap of shit and come and race. So we had a bunch of people who shouldn't be on the track, in cars that shouldn't be on the track, and running around in like really slow lap times and just not putting on a decent show. And we'd lost people like Robin Best wasn't racing anymore, Barry Graham wasn't racing anymore, Max Dumsey wasn't racing anymore, Alan Grice wasn't racing anymore, Jim Richards wasn't racing anymore, Charlie O'Brien wasn't racing anymore, Steve Harrington wasn't racing anymore. There's a list as long as your arm of all the guys who had gone away. Now, don't get me wrong, we still had some quality drivers out there. We still had Kim Jane, we still had Dean Monless, we still had Neville Lance from WA. We still had a handful of quality drivers in quality cars. But the cars were, like, even my car in 1999 was 4 years old. So, and it was one of the newer cars there. Bruce Peacock, Neville Lance's car owner, he'd bought a new car for that team, and there was a couple of other pretty close to new cars, and like Kim Jane's car had all been updated into the latest specs, so it was a good car too. But we didn't have the product. Nobody's going to come and watch a bunch of wannabes driving junk, and that's what happened. It had nothing. Bob was still supplying the infrastructure, he was still paying us the money, he was still supporting us, still putting the show on. So yeah, and like, we had a huge meeting with all the drivers and the team owners and Bob, where we had to make a commitment to what we were going to do. I made a commitment to run 2 cars. We all had to put $10,000 in to prove to Bob that we were committed. I put 20 grand in. I put money in for another driver who was there who said he was going to race, but he was full of shit. And then other drivers who were there who said they were going to be there, who were going to race, and they were going to put their money up to prove that they were committed, just didn't do it. So Bob couldn't, like, the drivers were expecting him to commit hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, well, millions of dollars really, to run the show for a season. But the drivers weren't prepared to commit just 10 grand. We weren't going to lose the 10 grand. It was just for us to show that we were committed to running. And I think there was maybe 8 of us put money up, and the rest said they would and didn't, or one asked me to, and I did, because he was just full of shit. So that's what happened. It was our fault. It was a collective our fault. We lost team owners. Like, we'd lost Ian Thomas is another one we lost. We'd lost Terry Byers is another one we lost. We lost guys who were drivers and team owners who were investing in the sport. People like Robin Best, who were investing heaps of money, and Ian Thomas, who was investing heaps of money. John Sidney, who had invested heaps of money in Barry Graham and Max Dumsey's cars. All these guys were gone. There just wasn't a show on anymore. There was no show, and the reason and it was nothing to do with anything to do with the track. The track was fine. It was always rough. People carry on about, oh, it's a track, it's too rough. It was always rough. It's better. It was better like a couple of years ago when I had a run on it than it was in the early 90s. You used to enter into turn 3 and your back wheels would come off the ground. And then you'd go hit a big dip coming out of turn 4 and nearly bottom the thing out, or you would bottom the thing out. Those two things had got fixed by Bob, but the track was always rough. So, guys, experts who never raced there have all got all these opinions and they all know everything, but they don't know anything. So that's what happened. That's why it ended. We continued on until 2002, but the last race we had on the Dome was in November '99, and that's what happened. It was our own fault. And it was just a matter that there was no new guys. We needed young speedway guys. We needed young dirt track guys in the cars, because that's where our fan base came from. And we weren't getting them, and nobody was buying cars. None of the Americans were coming anymore because no one could offer them a good car to drive. Rodney Combs wasn't racing anymore. We just didn't have the quality cars or drivers on the track. That's what happened. Cheers.